Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We are doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yes, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Kicking off the new week on Wall Street, nervous time on Main Street over tariffs. Stocks ending the day mixed today, but recovering from earlier losses. We did see our earnings in focus today, which helped to perk up the mood on some better-than-expected results. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 114 points, the S&P 500 of 3.5, and the NASDAQ pulling back 17 points. We've just seen the Dow rack up its longest winning streak of 2025 of 5 sessions in a row. The S&P 500 erased losses of as much as 1%. Today, the Dow edged up slightly, notching its longest winning streak of the year, both averages ending in positive territory for the fifth straight day. The NASDAQ did pull back slightly today. Earnings will be the highlight this week, with a lot of the S&P 500 companies expect to report their results, including Apple, coming out with earnings news later this week. Amazon, Meta, Microsoft will be coming out. Coca-Cola, Eli Lilly, and Chevron also out with earnings this week. General Motors will be reporting its first quarter earnings before the opening bell tomorrow, and Apple will report its second quarter earnings after the bell on Thursday, usually a half an hour after the closing bell for Apple. Wall Street coming off a rebounding run last week. This after the president eased some pressure on the Federal Reserve chairman, hinting at the light at the end of the tunnel for 145% tariffs on China as well that helped to perk up the mood last week. President Trump also said he doesn't plan to fire the Fed chairman. Today we heard from the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who said it was up to China to de-escalate the trade battle. We'll also be getting a lot of news on the economy this week, including the release of the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, the Personal Consumer Expenditures Index, and then the big enchilada of monthly economic reports will be coming out on Friday. The April jobs report will be coming out first thing Friday morning, an hour ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street. The price of oil moving lower today on economic uncertainty and concerns about extra supply from OPEC. We saw the Brent crude price hovering at around $65 a barrel today, and in New York, the West Texas Intermediate price of oil hovering just above $62 a barrel now. Price of gold moving higher today, right now hovering at around $3,348 an ounce. Silver at $33 and change. Bitcoin holding up around $95,000. I'll discuss the latest on Bitcoin, cryptos, and the whole works today, including the big news that Arizona has just become the first state in the country to pass a Bitcoin reserve bill that allows for up to 10% of public funds to be invested in virtual currencies like Bitcoin. I'll discuss the latest on that with crypto expert and business journalist ELEANOR, the co-host of the Crypto in America podcast. And as the president gets set to mark the first 100 days of his second term in office, uncertainty over tariffs very much in focus. The president escalating the tariff battle against Canada, Mexico, and China as punishment for allowing fentanyl into the U.S., then announcing more widespread taxes on foreign imports this past month, part of what he described as Liberation Day that happened on April 2nd. Looks like the president has retreated from parts of that plan now, leaving in place tariffs on China as high as 145%. How's all this impacting business here in Southern California? We'll get an update tonight from Jeff Ball, the president and CEO of the Orange County Business Council. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the whole works now. Top-ranked money manager Ken Winans live with us now, president and chief investment officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. Ken Winans is also a market historian, author of several books, including his latest, Investment Atlas 3, Creating Wealth Using Historical Trends, also Forbes magazine contributor. He has his crypto credentials, too, and most importantly, he's host of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday night at 6 p.m. on your favorite station, 790 KBC. Ken Winans, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Well, Frank, it's my pleasure. And, you know, the only thing you missed in that whole thing, and you never miss anything, Mr. Mottek, it is the Canadian elections, which we're going to find out tonight who their new leader is up there. And from what I'm gathering, it is very, very close to call. We'll wait and see how it plays out. But that obviously being, it is one of our largest trading partners, we do care if we're going to have a good negotiation partner. But Frank, I'll have to say this, you know, it's as somebody who has to be a news junkie, if you're going to be a money manager, you have to follow it. And a lot of it I don't agree with. I have to try to read both sides. But it is, if you want to talk about the most negative adjectives to describe where the world is, whether it's geopolitically, economically, and I pointed out to a couple of my clients who don't necessarily see the world the same way I do, and they're just rattling all this off, and they're saying, I just can't believe as a historian you are not taking this more serious. And I simply say, okay, how come the S&P 500 is down as of right now only 6%? If this is going to be the worst economy ever, why is it that major benchmarks are largely not great but okay? Why do we have, their big headline in the Wall Street Journal, consumers feel downdraft, but they keep spending? So, you have all these contradictions, Frank, but I'll talk about it later. But I think there's two key things that I keep throwing as, green shoots that we should keep an eye on. Number one, a lot of the retailers are still doing really well. Stocks are performing well. Financials are generally doing well. And later I'll talk about some income investments. But generally speaking, corporate bonds are still doing very well. And if you were going to talk about the demise of corporate America, you would expect bonds to be going through the floor. It's just not happening.
On there live with top-ranked money manager Ken Winans. And Ken, let me ask you about the earnings news. As you noted on this program and also on Winning with Winans, earnings very much in focus and appear to be driving a lot of the market action, certainly with what we've seen lately, starting with the bank names that came out a couple of weeks ago. How are these earnings numbers playing out here now? And looks like we got a pretty decent rally here for the blue chips anyway, up 5 sessions in a row here.
We absolutely do. And it's even broader than that, Frank. When I look at I have my own stock index that looks at the older corporations. You don't get into my index unless your company's been publicly traded for over 40 years. But here's the problem with this earnings season. We are literally having to get these numbers. And, one of the things we always like is just general guidance on where companies see things going for the remainder of the year. And that part of it, people in my position are flying blind. Companies are being very close-lipped on where they think the world will be by the third and fourth quarters this year. So the numbers are actually looking pretty good. Now, you rattled off a lot of companies posting earnings. The two that I am personally going to be watching very, very closely is going to be Amazon, because, again, if you want to talk about a company that is in the front lines of the tariff situation, and the other one, believe it or not, Frank, is MasterCard. They talk about people are still spending money. I want to see how much they're spending. I think those two will be really important bits of information of where we are going into summer. But we have still got a long ways to go, my friend. Earnings season is all companies move their earnings back. We're not going to be done with earnings season, I think, until well into next month. It's just the nature of where things are right now.
All right, we're going to be talking tariffs and the impact already with what's going on here at the ports, and also trucking is being impacted. Truckers hauling export freight to the ports of L.A. this week will likely be turning around and heading home with an empty load, according to Fortune magazine. What do you see happening here with the shipping companies and those that are on the front line of the uncertainty over the tariff situation?
I'm trying to put my lessons learned during COVID in line with how to deal with the logistics of this. And the simple fact of the matter is that a lot of companies had previously stocked their warehouses. I know, many of the audience probably know I now live in Las Vegas. We got big, massive warehouse facilities, and they stocked them up. Many of the companies late last year, especially right after the election, they had already really began to stock things up. So the problem with tariffs is that it's going to be very lopsided. I think when we go to the grocery store, we go to a mall, and you're going to look at some things, and there will clearly be some things that are eye-popping prices, and for something that's new. And you might decide that the old law in economics, the law of substitution, you will find something that fits more what you're looking for at a more reasonable price. I actually think we could find the better retailers who are more nimble on cost savings. We might find that the full effect of tariffs, especially for just our general daily lives, is, assuming this goes on for a year, Frank, which I'm of the opinion we're going to start having trade deals coming together probably within the next 100 days. But with that being said, I just don't think it's going to be, it's not going to be like it was back in the 1970s when oil prices quadrupled overnight and it radically shifted everything instantaneously. This is going to have a much more cumulative long-term effect. And I think that we will all figure out how to get through it. And being that we're in, still one of the most diverse economies in the world with a lot of choices, I don't think most people will find it be that difficult to get through. My personal view.
All right, and we're on the air live with Ken Winans, and regarding the Canadian elections, tell us what's at stake here, Ken. We're going to watch the loonie tonight. That, of course, is the Canadian dollar. We've looks like we're at $1.38 versus the Canadian dollar here at the moment, and so certainly a lot riding here as far as the leadership of our neighbors to the north. Tell us about what's at stake here as we watch the election results come in tonight there.
Well, to have a little bit of fun with this, Frank, we're in the middle of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and if you do a count, we've got about half Canadian teams and half U.S. teams fighting for the Stanley Cup. So far, so good. Hockey players generally don't get too political. We go out there, or you go out there to watch the game and watch it. But it is important to note. It's funny because a friend of mine who went to watch one of the games up in Canada commented how much more expensive it was for him to go up to Canada to stay in a hotel and eat out. So, there are certainly some effects on that. But I think the bottom line to us, look, trade and commerce globally is a mutually beneficial, mutually needed thing. The simple fact of the matter is that Canada and Mexico need us, need the United States. They need the consumer base of the United States. And I really do think calmer heads are going to prevail as we go through the year. But the reason that the election is so important, and everybody is saying in Canada, the tariff situation in the United States, our security pacts with the United States are all very, very important, that this election actually matters. And it really is, who is President Trump going to be talking to try to get this thing to calm down and move forward? So it is a very important election.
On there live with money manager Ken Winans, and you're also a Bitcoin aficionado and keeping an eye on the cryptos. Ken, what about Bitcoin in all of this? Holding up pretty well this past week, rebounding back at around 95,000 here at the moment. What are your observations here on how cryptos have performed recently?
Frank, of all the studies I've done on crypto, the one that keeps coming back is this unbelievable relationship that it has with the NASDAQ and the NASDAQ 100. And the fact the NASDAQ came back so strong after those lows of several weeks ago, and that crypto, again, not in lockstep, but very much followed suit in the fact that we've had this rally. I think, here's the thing about crypto. And again, you have to kind of let this thing play out. Now, you mentioned Arizona is going to start allowing crypto to be experimented with in their public pensions. I know for a fact that other states are considering the same thing, including California. California being that you have several of the big miners and the big crypto exchanges are all based in California. You would think they'd want to support a local thriving financial area. So let's see if they do that. But I think at the end of the day, what I would just simply say is this: whether you're talking about crypto or stocks or anything, including real estate, we should just put this word in our mind for the year: trendless. This is not a trending market. This is a range-bound. Highs have been made, lows have been made. Things are going to trade throughout the year. And what you want to do is to look for specific opportunities. Now, in the case of crypto, right now Bitcoin clearly is the healthiest of the bunch, especially with that disaster with Ethereum. But I think, you have to become a picker of individual investments to navigate this world for the foreseeable future. And I think crypto certainly fits that camp as well. I would just say this very quickly. Although I'm a big fan of certainly everybody who's had gold in their portfolio is doing very, very well. But I would just say this: when you start seeing the headlines in the news, this was Barron's this last weekend, the gold rush. You know what? Maybe the gold play is getting a little crowded right now. So again, just be very careful not to go what's popular, but pick your points well, buy if you need it. And in this world, there's nothing called a long-term investment. This is block and tackling. This is figuring out a way how to make money when you have a trendless situation. So that's again, everybody needs to sit back, pick your points, and pivot your portfolio accordingly.
On the tech front, we're watching Tesla rebound over the last week, up 18%, up again slightly today to 285 and change. What's your view on what's happening with Tesla here? And gosh, NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, is at 108 and change here now, pulling back a couple of dollars after its rebound over the past week.
You know, Frank, it's kind of what I just said before. It's all trendless. I think we've seen the highs and the lows this year, and you're just going to have these various things based on news kind of move along. Now, if we're looking towards, and I find it kind of interesting that, especially for the folks in California, I mean, you overwhelmingly voted for an EV mandate to have electric cars be your main power source for getting around the state. And again, I don't see any way of meeting that mandate, especially with tariffs, if you're not going to be overwhelmingly looking at Tesla as your main way of doing that. So I think a macro play on Tesla makes sense. But you know what, Frank, one thing I've noticed, all the headlines we've had now about, people vandalizing Teslas, not to say that we're short-lived in news, but I bet a year from now, we're going to long forget about that. We're going to go back to economics. People are going to go back and say, you know what, Tesla makes a good product. They're coming out with new designs, live and let live, buy what works, buy what makes sense. And I think that's where we're going to go. But we're still in that news feed right now. Again, just like we talked about during COVID and all the horrible riots that were going on and all the day-to-day headlines that you and I remember very well, this is an eerily familiar play on that situation 6 years ago. But no, I think, when you start talking about EV in the United States, I think you dominantly have one play, and it is Tesla.
On the air live with Ken Winans. And Ken, at this point, any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, you have me come on because I talk about things that most people do not talk about. And I'll just throw this out. I would not be surprised if we're going to have one of those years that income investments outperform overall stocks and for that matter, real estate. And so one of the things I thought I would bring up, because I know nobody else really talks about, I am just amazed at some of the yields that investors are getting today on preferred stocks. So very quickly, preferred stocks they're a type of equity that pays a very high dividend. But I've had a lot of people say, well, I want to start buying real estate because people are going back to work.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
What do you think of working with the SEALs? We went out every night going after bad guys. I was humbled.
There was no going back home. I would be in another room crying because I was afraid to go to sleep because of what was coming for me in the middle of the night.
How long did it take you to be able to talk about it?
A long time. But I realized my experiences may help other people too.
The men like yourself are considered legends in the community.
You're right.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Well, here's just a good example. Vornado Realty, the huge REIT that's been around since the 1970s, it right now has preferred stocks that are paying 7.6%, Frank. Let me repeat that. That's not a misnomer. 7.6. I do not think the equity markets are going to give you 7.6%. Average annual rates of return. I would take a good look at that. The other area that I've been very big on, obviously, are financials. Hey, go take a look. There's a U.S. bank. Branches are all over the place. It has a preferred right now that's paying 6.4%. So I would just encourage people in the audience, look, don't sit back, hope and pray your stocks rebound. Pivot, make some adjustments. And I think for older investors, I haven't seen yields in preferred stocks like this really since COVID. And these are more secure. They accrue. These are big companies that are making money. I think it doesn't hurt to move money around, put it in new areas.
Terrific, Ken. Thanks for taking the call here this afternoon. We will continue the conversation to complement the conversation we just had here, and that'll happen at 6 o'clock this evening on Winning with Winans. I'll rejoin Ken Winans this evening at 6 o'clock right here on 790 KABC. That is top-ranked money manager Ken Winans, the president and chief investment officer at Winans Investments, which you can find at winansinvestments.com. WINANS.com. Ken Winans, author of numerous books, including his latest, Investment Atlas 3, also Forbes magazine contributor. And as you heard, he has his crypto credentials, too, and most importantly, hosts of Winning with Winans, heard every Monday night at 6 p.m. right here on 790 KBC. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. A lot more to talk about here, Ken. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
My pleasure. Talk to you tonight. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. And as of the freeways now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Mixed finish for the stock market today. Another seesaw session with the Dow closing higher by 114 points at 40,228. The S&P 500 of 3.5 at 5,529. We've just seen the longest winning streak of the year for both the Dow and the S&P 500 up 5 sessions in a row. The Nasdaq, though, slipped 17, selling at 17,366. The yield on the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, now 4.21%. Gold hovering at $3,348 and change, up $1.10 here at the moment. Silver up 6 cents at $33.38 an ounce. Crude oil hovering just above $62 a barrel. Tesla, which had that gain of about nearly 20% last week, moving higher again today, up 93 cents at $285.88. Apple today up 86 cents at $210 and change. Apple will be out with its earnings report on Thursday this week. General Motors will be reporting earnings first thing tomorrow morning. Ahead of that announcement, GM stock today closed of 13 cents at 47.24. Checking the cryptos now, we see Bitcoin pulling back about 300 at 94,551. Ethereum up 8, 1,795, and Doge at the moment at 18 cents. Shares of NVIDIA down more than $2 today at 108 and change. The dollar right now at 138 versus the Canadian dollar. We're at 19.59 versus the Mexican peso, against the euro at 114, the yen at 142, and 134 versus the British pound sterling. And now the latest news here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KBC. Bitcoin holding up at around $95,000 today. Arizona making history, meanwhile, becoming the first state in the nation to pass a Bitcoin reserve bill, allowing up to 10% of public funds to be invested in virtual currencies like Bitcoin. ELEANOR TERRETT on X reported this today, and joining us live now is the one and only ELEANOR TERRETT, the co-host of the Crypto in America podcast. ELEANOR, thank you very much for taking the call and taking from the top. Tell us about the big news today, the Grand Canyon state suddenly becoming the crypto state here today.
That's right, Frank. Well, thank you for having me again. And today, Arizona became the first state to pass not one, but two pieces of legislation that would allow the state treasurer to invest up to 10% of public funds in digital assets like Bitcoin. In other words, it's a blueprint for creating what's known as a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Now, that's something Donald Trump is also trying to create at the federal level, but states are having more luck, it seems. While both bills have passed the Arizona House and Senate, they have one final hurdle to clear, and that may be the hardest hurdle of all. That's the approval by Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs. It's unclear whether she'll sign them into law at this moment. Arizona, as you know, is a very purple state, and crypto has become politicized since Donald Trump's embrace of the industry on the campaign trail. His family has since launched several business initiatives around crypto, which has sparked big backlash from Democrats. But I spoke to Arizona State Representative Jeff Wenninger right before I got on the phone with you, Frank, and he said he had a big hand in these bills, first of all, but he said that he's hopeful crypto has become enough of a bipartisan issue, at least in Arizona, at the state level, to become law. We should have a better idea of the governor's thinking next week, so I'll check back in with you then. But I think a big takeaway here is that the concept of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, similar to a gold reserve, to help hedge against inflation and diversify state portfolios, is catching on, and as many as 26 states have tried for similar legislation so far this year. I believe 6 are, in the running for possibly getting something passed in 2025, so we'll stay tuned there. But corporations are buying Bitcoin too. More than 94 public companies hold Bitcoin in their corporate treasuries today, Frank, and that number is up from 79 2 weeks ago when I last checked. So people are catching on to the Bitcoin trend, it seems.
That is very interesting. We're on the air live with ELEANOR TERRETT, who, by the way, is a crypto expert and a terrific business journalist, and appreciate your updates here as we follow this very, very closely. And so Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs has these two bills on her desk. Has she indicated directly what she plans to do with this one way or the other? Any comment from the governor there at this point?
No comment from the governor yet, but this will be the first crypto legislation. If she agrees to sign it, it will be the first crypto legislation to pass her desk and be signed into law. So we're not entirely sure where she stands on her crypto thinking, but as I said, she is a Democrat. Crypto has become more politicized, since it was taken up by Donald Trump as a political issue at the federal level. So we will definitely stay tuned on that, but no indication as of yet. But we should know in about 5 days. I believe that's the amount of time in Arizona where a bill has to go to the governor's desk, and then he or she makes a decision on it. She could choose to veto it, or she could choose to not sign it, and then it would automatically become law past that point. But I think she probably will decide one way or the other, whether she vetoes or whether she passes. We will have to check back in next week, Frank.
All right, and of course, a lot of speculation now as to what that might mean for the price of Bitcoin and other cryptos. If she does sign it or doesn't sign it, what's the current thinking on the impact on potential impact on prices?
Right. Well, we didn't see the price change too much even after the announcement that the House had passed the legislation today. But Bitcoin is slowly creeping up to that 100,000 mark again. It's bouncing back 25% from its lows earlier this month. Frank, when we spoke earlier this month, right after Donald Trump's tariff announcements, Bitcoin was not having a great time, but it has crept back up 25% from those lows. But keep in mind, crypto markets are different than traditional markets in that they are inherently much more volatile. So, for example, a 20% pullback in the S&P would be considered a bear market. But with Bitcoin and other cryptos, they can correct anywhere from 30 to 50% in a normal cycle. And investors seasoned investors anyway, barely bat an eyelid because these wild swings just kind of come with the territory. But we are seeing resilience across the broader crypto markets this week, not just in Bitcoin. We're seeing weekly gains for Ethereum, 14% higher, XRP 11% higher, and 9% for Solana on the week there. We can chalk this up to, I think, just a general boost in sentiment across the board. I've been talking to industry players, and they say that industry is hopeful Congress will meet President Trump's deadline of August recess to get him unified text of both stablecoin and market structure bills. So legislation on the horizon is definitely contributing to that positivity.
That is very interesting, and it should also be noted, it's been, about a week or so since the new SEC chair has taken his position. Paul Atkins, you were at his Senate confirmation hearing in the last month or so. What about his first week or so in that position? Any significant announcements out of the SEC related to the crypto world?
Right. So Paul Atkins was officially sworn in last week. So today marks his first full week on the job. He was sworn in actually twice last week. He did the formal ceremony at the SEC on the Monday, and then the more ceremonial ceremony on the Tuesday, where actually Scott Bessent was the oath bearer. He held the book, and Paul Atkins took the oath with Scott Bessent and with Donald Trump in the room too. It took place in the Oval Office, and Paul Atkins made a speech, and he's pumping up the crypto, sentiment. I think probably his take on the industry, him being such a seasoned crypto, not only investor, but also an advocate for the industry, is definitely adding to that positive sentiment we're seeing. But we also saw him make his first public remarks at a crypto roundtable held at the SEC headquarters on Friday. I mentioned before on your show that the SEC has been very, open under new Republican leadership to digital assets, to blockchain technology, to the point where they're hosting these roundtable events where they're trying to get input from industry as to how they should be thinking about regulating crypto. But Paul Atkins took the opportunity on Friday to give a little dig to his predecessor, Gary Gensler. He said that the SEC fostered market and regulatory uncertainty that resulted in innovation being stifled in the crypto industry. He said he also expects huge benefits from the use of blockchain technology for better market efficiency, cost reduction, transparency, and risk mitigation. So Paul Atkins is bullish on crypto, and crypto is bullish on Paul Atkins.
What's up, everyone? It's Trevor Sikkema here from the PFF NFL Show, here to get you ready for the 2025 NFL Draft. We're dropping PFF podcast episodes 3 times a week with the rankings, sleepers, team fits, mock drafts, and more, powered by the same data used by all 32 NFL teams. If you want a deeper insight into this year's class and how it all shapes up on draft day, we've got you covered. Become a smarter draft fan right now on the PFF NFL Podcast. The PFF NFL Podcast, part of the Believe Network. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Very interesting. On the line with ELEANOR TERRETT. And ELEANOR, you mentioned some of those bills in Washington that potentially could impact crypto. Maybe you can highlight some of that for us. And what other states, by the way, are looking at a Bitcoin bill, a Bitcoin reserve similar to what lawmakers in Arizona just passed today?
Yeah, so on the state level, I believe it's 6 states have the chance to potentially pass a similar bill to Arizona. The front runners on that list are Texas and New Hampshire. So we could see something moving from them in the next couple of weeks or so. But in regards to the federal level, we actually spoke to the chair of the House Financial Services Committee, French Hill. We had him on the Crypto in America podcast, and his episode drops on Wednesday. But he told us that House staffers spent their Easter break pretty busy drafting a new market structure bill that builds on the Fit for the 21st Century Act, which was actually a market structure bill thought up by Glenn Thompson in the House Agriculture Committee and Patrick McHenry, the former chair of the House Financial Services Committee. That market structure bill, it passed the House last year, but obviously with the Senate leadership was Democrat last year. It was not Republican, so it didn't even make it to the House to the Senate for consideration. So this new iteration that House staffers have been working on is basically an updated version of the Fit for the 21st Century Act. This is crucial. I mean, I've talked about stablecoin legislation on your show before. Well, crafting a regulatory framework for payment stablecoins will be incredibly important. A market structure bill is even more important because it will basically act as the legal infrastructure for which digital assets and blockchain technology can run on. And it's also more complicated because it involves ironing out, which regulator will get jurisdiction over digital assets, whether it's the SEC or the CFTC, and which assets are considered securities and commodities. So all these questions that the industry has been asking for years and years will finally get answered with this very crucial bill. And we should know more in the coming days. House lawmakers are hoping to put out a discussion draft of that market structure bill ahead of a House hearing next Tuesday. So we'll keep you updated on the state's bill, the federal bills, and everything going on with Bitcoin's price, Frank.
That's terrific, and we look forward to seeing you next week at the Milken Institute Global Conference here in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, actually, and we will continue the conversation and your terrific coverage here. Eleanor, thank you very much for joining us live here. That is crypto expert and business journalist Eleanor TERRETT, the co-host of the Crypto in America podcast, live with us here. Eleanor, thank you very much again for taking the call live with us here today.
Thank you, Frank. I'll see you next week.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And out to the freeways we go now on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. How is all the uncertainty and tariff talk impacting business here in Southern California? Let's bring in a giant on the local business scene, Jeff Ball, the president and CEO of the Orange County Business Council. Jeff Ball, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Frank, great to chat with you again. Another beautiful afternoon here at Orange County. I hope you're well.
Fantastic. And give us your view of things from your beautiful vantage point there in the OC.
Well, Frank, we've got a lot of uncertainty in the market here, obviously, as a result of some of the different tariff talk. I think we all can certainly understand the reason why the administration is going about this. We've got unsustainable trade deficit, unsustainable fiscal deficit, and clearly something needs to be done, but I think a lot of the herky-jerky motions and uncertainty has left our business community a bit perplexed. There is a quarterly survey that is done by the Wood Center at Cal State Fullerton that we're involved with, and it talks to business leaders throughout Orange County to get their view on the markets. And whereas that confidence index was about 66% before the election, and then in the fourth quarter and first quarter had jumped up to 86%. For the second quarter, we saw it drop down to 52%. So it went from 86% down to 52%, Frank. And the most common theme that we heard in there was confusion about the tariffs and just the uncertainty that it is leaving in the market with a lot of the short-term changes that are happening. Obviously, we've seen the impact in the stock market, but for us, it's where we see a lot of that confidence index. And of course, that's where a lot of our investment comes from. But, having said that, things continue to be strong. Our unemployment numbers came in very good with low unemployment, and income continues to grow.
On the line with Jeff Ball, the president and CEO of the Orange County Business Council. Among the movers and shakers you're talking to there in the OC, tell us a bit more about how this uncertainty is impacting the mood there, and that survey you mentioned is quite significant. People not sure how to price things, inflation an open question, supply chain and all that. What are some of the discussions going on there?
So a couple of things, Frank. First of all, relevant to the supply chain, anybody that's, managing an inventory system, it creates a lot of uncertainty in terms of that. But what's interesting is with these reciprocal tariffs, you have a number of industries that have never been subject to tariffs that all of a sudden need to become overnight experts. And they have to become overnight experts during a very volatile time in that segment. So even our experienced companies are dealing with a lot of uncertainty on how to make longer term decisions and how to approach some of their short-term purchasing strategies. But now you have a number of industries such as medtech that's very big here in Orange County. They've never dealt with this. And so we have to work with them and help them get up to speed in understanding exactly how tariffs are structured, the operating side of that, and then, of course, how they need to strategize. So all of this just creates a lot of uncertainty for our businesses, and Orange County Business Council is here working with them, trying to help provide solutions. In fact, we're going to be hosting an event in partnership with the Nixon Library on May 28th on the topic of tariffs and looking at it more from an operational and strategic perspective, Frank, to help these companies deal with the uncertainty and enter this new world that they could potentially get launched into unwillingly.
Well, that sounds like a terrific and very timely discussion. Tell us more about that, and how can people get more information about that?
So it's going to be on the morning of May 28th at 9 a.m. We're just pulling a lot of the details together regarding it, and your listeners can get information by signing up for my newsletter. If they go to ocbc.org, down at the bottom of the page, they can enter their email to subscribe to our newsletter that goes out on a biweekly basis, and we'll have updates regarding the event as we bring more of the details together.
All right. I see on your calendar you have something happening next week as well. OC known for a lot of innovation, right? Tell us what's happening next week.
Well, Frank, we're very proud of the innovation community and platforms that we have here in Orange County. So while you're soaking it up at the Milken Conference in Beverly Hills, we will be hosting our Innovation Week here in Orange County. We have a whole series of events that take place throughout the week, all centered on the key industries of Orange County, as well as innovation, and a lot of great activities that are planned. And that information is, it's an event that we do with our partners at Octane and with UC Irvine. And the best way to get information is at octaneoc.org/OCIW. Orange County Innovation Week will be kicking it off with great reception on Monday evening, which is Cinco de Mayo, by the way, and going all the way through Friday. And in the midst of it, OCBC will be having its annual healthcare forum, which is a great discussion focused on our leading healthcare industry here in Orange County. And that's going to take place on the morning of May 6th, Tuesday, at the beautiful waterfront Hilton in Huntington Beach. So if you get bored at the Milken Conference, Frank, we'd love to have you down here for a little innovation on the beach side.
That's wonderful, Jeff. Well, thanks for the invite, and thanks for that comprehensive update on all things Business OC. Jeff Ball, the president and CEO of the Orange County Business Council, the voice of business in Orange County. Thank you very much, Jeff, for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much, and stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz, followed by Winning with Winans at 6. We'll continue here on Mottek On Money tomorrow at 4 here on 790 KBC.
NBA veteran Jim Jackson takes you on the court.
You get a chance to dig into my 14-year career in the NBA and also get the input from the people that will be joining. Charles Barkley.
I'm excited to be on your podcast, man. It's an honor.
Spike Lee, entrepreneur, filmmaker, Academy Award winner.
Knicks fan.
So, now you see, I got you. But also how sports brings life, passion, music, all of this together.
The Jim Jackson Show, part of the Rich Eisen Podcast Network. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.